The blizzard screamed through Black Fang peaks like a living thing, tearing at trees and burying the land under mountains of snow. In the heart of this white hell, a small shape struggled. A pure white bear cub, his fur matted with ice, his tiny body shaking violently. His weak whimpers were swallowed by the wind's roar as he buried himself deeper into the snowbank, desperate for warmth. The storm didn't care. It kept coming, relentless, stealing his body heat degree by degree. His breathing slowed, his heartbeat faltered. This was nature's cruelest truth. In the Alaskan wilderness, even the innocent could freeze to death before their lives truly began. But then, a sound. Not the wind, not the trees. Something else was out there in the blinding snow. That pitiful cry carried further than the cub could have imagined. Storm, the massive alpha male with a pelt as dark as midnight, froze mid-step. His golden eyes narrowed. Aurora, his silver-furred mate, lifted her nose to the wind. That sound, it wasn't the usual noises of the wild. Too small, too broken. The pack tensed as the whimper came again, weaker this time. Wolves didn't save bears. Nature didn't work that way. But that sound, it clawed at something primal in Storm's chest. Aurora met his gaze, a silent conversation passing between them. That wasn't just some animal out there. That was a child, and the storm was killing it. The cub's heart hammered against his ribs as dark shapes materialized from the swirling snow. Wolves. Big ones. Their eyes glowed like fire in the whiteout. He tried to scramble back, but his frozen limbs refused to obey. The lead wolf, a monster of muscle and fur, loomed over him, hot breath steaming in the air. This was it, the end. But then, something impossible happened. The giant wolf didn't attack. Instead, it leaned down and sniffed. The cub squeezed his eyes shut, waiting for the pain. But all he felt was warmth as the pack closed in around him, their bodies forming a living barrier against the storm. Why? Why would natural enemies protect him? The answer would change everything. Not all the wolves agreed. Rhaegar, the beta male, bared his teeth, saliva freezing on his fangs. A bear was a bear, future predator, future threat. He lunged, only to be body-slammed by Aurora. The alpha female's snarl shook the very air as she stood over the cub, her message clear: touch him and die. Storm watched silently as his mate did the unthinkable. With gentle teeth, Aurora lifted the shivering cub by the scruff, just as she would one of her own pups. The cub dangled helplessly, too weak to resist. Where were they taking him? To a den? To a meal? The pack fell in line behind their alphas, their breath creating ghostly clouds in the moonlight. Tonight, the rules of nature had been rewritten. The cave smelled of earth and musk and safety. The cub blinked as Aurora deposited him gently onto a bed of dried moss. Around him, wolf pups tumbled over each other, their curious noses poking at this strange new sibling. One brave pup licked the ice from his face. The cub flinched, then leaned into the touch. Warmth. After so much cold, he'd forgotten what warmth felt like. Storm watched from the entrance, his massive frame blocking the wind. The cub didn't understand. Why show mercy? Why share food? Why risk everything for an enemy's child? Aurora curled around him. Her heart beat steady against his back. No answers came. Just warmth. Just safety. Just family. For the first time since the storm took his mother, the white bear cub slept without fear. Days passed. The pack gave him a name: Snowblood. for his white fur, for surviving the storm that should have killed him. The pups treated him like a clumsy brother, nipping his heels during play. Aurora groomed him with rough licks that made his fur stand on end. Even Rhaegar tolerated his presence now, though the beta's eyes still held warning. But survival came at a cost. The other wolves could run for miles without tiring. Snowblood stumbled in their tracks, his paws raw from ice cuts. When they howled at the moon, his voice cracked pitifully. He wasn't one of them. Could never be. Yet every morning, Storm would nudge him awake with a cold nose, patient as the cub learned to move like a wolf, hunt like a wolf, think like a wolf. The lessons were hard, the wilderness harder. But Snowblood had something rare, a pack that refused to let him fail.
The first real test came too soon. Another blizzard. The pack needed to move. Their usual hunting grounds were frozen over. Snowblood struggled through drifts that came up to his chin, his lungs burning with each breath. Aurora stayed by his side, her body a guidepost in the white chaos. Then disaster. The cub plunged through hidden ice into freezing water. The shock stole his breath. The current pulled. Just as darkness crept into his vision, teeth clamped onto his scruff. Storm hauled him out with a grunt, the alpha's muscles straining. The pack formed a tight circle around their drenched charge, licking warmth back into his limbs. No words were needed. Their message was clear. We don't leave family behind, not even when nature itself says we should. Fever came that night. Snowblood's tiny body shook violently, his breaths coming in ragged gasps. The wolves knew the signs: hypothermia, death's doorstep. Aurora made a decision. One by one, the pack members curled around the cub, their body heat his only medicine. Storm draped his heavy tail over the shivering form. The pups, for once, stayed quiet. Outside, the wind screamed its frustration. Inside the den, a miracle happened. Heartbeat by heartbeat, warmth returned to Snowblood's veins. By dawn, the crisis had passed. The cub woke to find Aurora's watchful gaze never leaving him. There was something new in her golden eyes, something no wolf should feel for a bear, something dangerously close to love.
As weeks turned to months, Snowblood grew stronger, faster. His white coat became both blessing and curse. Perfect camouflage in snowdrifts, but when he wandered too far, even his pack couldn't spot him. One hunting trip nearly ended in tragedy when the cub strayed after a snowshoe hare. A grizzly's roar split the air. A mature male, twice Snowblood's size. The wolves reacted instantly, forming a protective circle around their adopted charge. Storm's challenge echoed through the trees. This bear was under wolf protection. The grizzly hesitated, confused by this unnatural alliance. Finally, with a dismissive snort, it lumbered away. Snowblood learned a hard lesson that day. The wilderness had rules, and his very existence broke every single one. Spring's first warmth brought new dangers. The pack traveled through a high pass when the unthinkable happened. A thunderous crack. Then the mountain itself seemed to move. Snowblood barely had time to yelp before the world turned upside down. Avalanche! Wolves scattered as tons of snow roared downhill. Aurora's desperate howl was cut short as the white waves swallowed her. Storm lunged for his mate and disappeared. Snowblood tumbled violently, snow filling his nose, his mouth, his lungs. Then, impact, darkness, silence. When he came to, the world had changed. The mountainside was scarred, the pack was gone, and from somewhere in the wreckage, a weak howl. Just one, then nothing. Snowblood was alone again. But this time he knew what to do. The cub lifted his muzzle to the sky and answered.
The snow had swallowed him whole. Snowblood kicked wildly, his lungs screaming for air as the avalanche's weight pressed down. Then, a sound, muffled but unmistakable. Howls, desperate, close. Claws scraped above him, frantic. Suddenly, light! A wolf's face appeared, Tikani, the youngest pack member, digging like mad. More paws joined. The pack had survived. They'd come back for him. As they dragged him free, Snowblood saw why only Tikani could find him. His white fur had blended perfectly with the snow. His greatest weakness had saved his life. The reunion was short-lived. Rhaegar limped badly, his paw pads shredded from digging through ice. Aurora licked the wounds clean, while Storm kept watch. The beta wolf had never accepted Snowblood, yet he'd torn himself apart to rescue him. When the cub approached timidly, Rhaegar growled, then shoved the last piece of frozen hair toward him with his nose. No words, just blood on snow, and understanding. The pack didn't just tolerate him now, they'd bleed for him. Moonlight turned the tundra silver. The pack moved like ghosts. Except Snowblood. His clumsy paws sent snow spraying. A snowshoe hare bolted. The wolves gave chase effortlessly while the cub floundered. Then instinct took over. He stopped fighting his nature. When the next hare appeared, Snowblood didn't run like a wolf. He ambushed like a bear. One powerful swipe sent snow exploding upward, startling the hare into the pack's waiting jaws. That night, they all ate well. Overconfidence cost him. The next hunt, Snowblood charged too early. The rabbit escaped. Worse, his roar scared off other prey. The pack went hungry. Storm didn't punish him. Didn't need to. The disappointed whines of the pups cut deeper than fangs. That night, Aurora nuzzled him, not in comfort, but to drag him outside. She demonstrated the hunt again and again, until his muscles burned and his breath came in gasps. The lesson was clear. Privilege in the pack came with responsibility.
Winter's last gasp was the cruelest. An ice storm turned the world into knives. The wolves' thick paw pads handled it easily. Snowblood's softer bare feet bled with every step. Yet when the pack chased a wounded caribou, he ran anyway. Blood painted the snow behind him. The caribou fell. As the pack fed, Storm did something unprecedented. He let Snowblood eat first. Honor earned through pain. The cub licked his torn paws that night, understanding this was the price of belonging. The storm hit at dusk, a monster even by Alaskan standards. The pack ran for shelter, Snowblood struggling to keep up. Through the whiteout, eerie howls answered theirs. Not pack, not friend. The rival wolves of Dead Man's Gorge had caught their scent, and they were closing in. Aurora shoved Snowblood toward a crevice. Hide, just as shadows emerged from the snow. Bigger wolves, meaner wolves, and they looked hungry. 5 against 7. Bad odds. The rival Alpha, a scarred brute named Fenrir, circled Storm while his pack targeted the weaker members. Snowblood trembled in his hiding spot as snarls and screams split the night. Then he saw it. Tikani. Tikani was family. With a roar that didn't sound like a bear or wolf, he charged. Chaos. Snowblood's unexpected attack sent rivals scattering. His claws, never used in anger before, raked across a flank. Fenrir turned from Storm, eyes widening at this unnatural fighter. For a heartbeat, the battle paused. Then Fenrir did something unexpected. He laughed. A chilling sound. "So the rumors are true," his growl seemed to say. "Wolves who keep pets." With a signal, his pack retreated, but their eyes promised this wasn't over.
Dawn revealed the cost. Rhagar's side torn open, Aurora favoring a front leg. They couldn't outrun Fenrir in this state. Storm stood atop a boulder, sniffing the wind. Their territory or unknown lands? Snowblood watched the Alpha's ears twitch toward a distant sound, rushing water. The ice rivers were melting. If they could reach the canyon... They almost made it. The pack was crossing a frozen stream when the ice cracked. Rhagar, weakened from his wounds, fell through. The current grabbed him instantly. Storm dove in after, but the water was too fast. The last they saw of their beta was his determined eyes locking with Snowblood's as the river took him under. No final howl, no dramatic last stand, just gone. That night, the pack's mourning cries echoed from miles, and Snowblood learned the hardest lesson. Sometimes, survival feels like losing.
The pack didn't move for 3 days. Aurora limped circles around their makeshift den, her injured leg dragging. Storm barely ate. Even playful Tikani just stared at the river where Rhagar disappeared. Snowblood tried to groom them like they'd always done for him, his tongue awkward on wolf fur. When Storm suddenly pressed his forehead against the cubs, hot tears melted tracks through the frost on both their muzzles. No one had to say it. Rhagar had died saving them, and now the pack was broken. They had to keep moving. Fenrir's pack would be hunting them, but every step hurt. Aurora's wound reopened, leaving bright red splashes in the snow. Snowblood stayed glued to her side, letting her lean on his growing shoulders. When she finally collapsed at dusk, Storm did something shocking. He stole food. A trapper's cache of frozen salmon guarded by steel traps. The Alpha, who'd never broken nature's rules, now risked everything for his mate. As Aurora ate, Storm kept watch, his ears flat against gunshot sounds in the distance.
The trapper's cabin was close, too close. Snowblood smelled the acrid stink before the others, smoke, oil, and something worse. Dried bear pelts nailed to the walls. The pack froze as a two-legged shape emerged, rifle glinting. This wasn't like Fenrir. Humans didn't fight fair. They didn't just kill, they took trophies. Storm's warning growl was barely audible. "Run! Now!" But Aurora was too weak. And Snowblood? Snowblood recognized the man's scent from somewhere deep in his cub memories. This was the same monster who'd shot his mother. The trap exploded upward with a metallic snap. Pain like fire raged up Snowblood's hind leg. He howled, a sound so wolf-like the trapper hesitated. That second saved his life. Storm and Aurora attacked as one, driving the man back toward his cabin. But the damage was done. The rusty teeth had bitten deep. Blood pooled black in the snow. Tikani whimpered, trying to pry the jaws open with his teeth. Useless. Somewhere nearby, the trapper was reloading, and Fenrir's pack was still out there. For the first time, Snowblood truly understood the wilderness didn't care who lived or died.
Aurora lost her mind. Seeing her adopted cub in agony, she turned into something terrifying. While Storm kept the trapper pinned inside with strategic lunges, she attacked the trap itself, biting, clawing, even slamming it against rocks until her muzzle bled. Finally, with a screech of bending metal, it gave way. Snowblood collapsed forward, his leg mangled but free. Aurora didn't pause. She grabbed his scruff and ran, Storm covering their retreat. Behind them, the trapper's shouts blended with a new sound. Fenrir's hunting howls. They were being herded right toward Dead Man's Gorge. The blizzard returned with vengeance.
Snow swirled so thick the trapper's next bullet went wild. Snowblood limped desperately after the wolves, his injured leg leaving a wobbling trail. Then, disaster. The edge of the gorge appeared through the snow, a sheer drop to icy rapids below. Fenrir's pack closed in from behind. The trapper's flashlight beam cut through the storm. Cornered. Aurora pressed against Snowblood, her breath coming in pained rasps. Storm faced their enemies, his lips peeled back in a snarl that promised, "We won't die alone."
Takani saved them. The young wolf had scouted ahead. There was a narrow ice bridge across the gorge, invisible until you were right on it. Storm went first, testing each step. Aurora nudged Snowblood forward. Every movement sent agony through his leg, but the cub gritted his teeth and followed. Halfway across, the trapper appeared at the cliff edge. His rifle came up, clicked empty. A curse ripped through the night as Fenrir's pack hit him from behind. The last thing Snowblood saw before the storm swallowed everything was the trapper falling beneath a pile of snarling wolves. Safety. Sort of. The abandoned bear den stank of mildew and old blood, but it was shelter. Aurora worked tirelessly, cleaning Snowblood's wounds with her tongue while Storm stood guard at the entrance. Takani brought what little food he could find, mostly frozen berries. The cub drifted in and out of fever dreams, each time waking to find a different pack member curled around him. Even in sleep, they whimpered with his pain. That's when Snowblood realized he wasn't just part of the pack now. He was their heart. And hearts couldn't afford to die.
The storm passed. Moonlight revealed their new reality. Aurora's injury was infected. Storm's ribs showed through his fur. Takani was too young to hunt alone, and Snowblood might never walk right again. Yet when the full moon rose, Storm threw back his head and sang. Not a mourning song for Rhaegar, not a victory cry. This was darker, wilder, a promise. One by one, the others joined, even Snowblood, his bear voice rough but determined. Across the gorge, Fenrir's pack answered. The message was clear. This wasn't over. The cub stood at dawn. His legs screamed protest, but he stood anyway. Aurora needed meat. The pack needed strength. Snowblood looked at his family, really looked. The way Storm's ears now had frostbite scars, how Aurora's once silver fur was matted with dirt and blood, Tikani's ribs showing. They'd given everything for him. Now he'd become what they needed. Not just a bear raised by wolves, not just a survivor, but a protector. Limping to the den entrance, Snowblood tested the wind. Somewhere out there was food, safety, a future, and he'd tear the throat out of anything that stood between his pack and that future, even if it killed him.
Snowblood's first solo hunt was a disaster. His injured leg buckled as he charged a ptarmigan, sending him face first into the snow. The bird flew off laughing, or at least it felt that way. But the wolves didn't mock him. Storm simply nudged the cub back up and demonstrated the stalk again, slower this time, more deliberate. Snowblood tried again and again, until finally his claws connected with feather instead of snow. The ptarmigan's neck snapped between his teeth. That night, as the pack shared his kill, something changed in their eyes. The cub had become a provider. The infection was winning. Aurora burned with fever, her breaths coming in shallow gasps. Storm desperately licked her wound clean, but the poison had taken root. Then Snowblood remembered. His mother had once dug up bitter roots when he'd been sick. Limping into the moonlight, he searched until his claws found the gnarled plants. Aurora thrashed as he pressed the poultice to her wound, but by dawn, the fever broke. Storm's grateful nudge nearly knocked the cub over.
The message was clear. Their family had just gotten stronger in ways no predator could ever understand.
Tikani found it, a buried metal box reeking of gun oil. Inside, miracles, salted meat, dried berries, and medicine. Human symbols on tiny bottles, but the wolves didn't care about labels. Snowblood's nose identified the bitter scent of antibiotics. That night, Aurora took her first full meal in weeks. Storm allowed himself to sleep more than a few minutes, and Tikani, the young wolf, proudly wore a trapper's red scarf around his neck like a trophy. Some rules were meant to be broken. Spring thaw turned the gorge into a roaring monster. The pack should have been hunting new growth, celebrating survival. Instead, they froze. Across the raging water, Fenrir's pack dragged something onto the rocks. Something with dark fur. Rhaegar? No, too small. A pup. One of theirs? Storm's snarl shook the very ground. This wasn't just murder. This was a message. Snowblood felt something awaken in his chest. Not fear. Not even rage. But certainty. The river would freeze again, and when it did, there would be a reckoning. Practice became obsession. Snowblood's legs strengthened as he mimicked the wolves' movements, but added his own twists. Where they dodged, he tanked hits. Where they nipped, he swiped with claws like knives. Storm watched quietly, then did something extraordinary. He attacked the cub at full strength. Fangs grazed Snowblood's shoulder. The cub responded not with fear, but with a roar that started deep in his belly and ended somewhere primal. The pack's ears flattened in instinctive fear, then pricked forward with newfound respect. Fenrir wouldn't be fighting wolves next time. He'd be fighting something far worse. Their revenge began with hunger. Not theirs, Fenrir's. Storm led them on a moonlit raid to the rival pack's hunting grounds. Not to fight, not yet, but to steal. Every cache, every kill. Left just enough to keep them alive, barely. Let Fenrir's pack learn what it meant to starve. Snowblood contributed in ways the wolves couldn't. His claws ripped through frozen meat caches they could never have opened. By the time they retreated, the message was clear. This wasn't a war of strength anymore. This was a war of wills, and the white bear had just become their secret weapon.
Youthful enthusiasm nearly cost everything. Tikani, scouting ahead, got too close to Fenrir's sentries. The ambush was brutal. By the time the pack arrived, the young wolf dangled from Fenrir's jaws like a broken toy. Storm froze, alpha to alpha. A silent negotiation. Then, Snowblood stepped forward. Not with a snarl, with an offer. Himself, for Tikani. Fenrir's laugh echoed across the ice, but when the rival alpha lunged, Snowblood didn't flinch. He took the fangs in his shoulder and clamped his jaws around Fenrir's front leg. A crunch echoed. The trade was made. That night, as Aurora cleaned both their wounds, Tikani licked Snowblood's face with desperate gratitude. Some lessons only came with blood. The final battle began at twilight, not with howls, but with silence. Storm's pack moved like mist between the trees. Snowblood, his white fur painted with mud for once, became their wraith. Fenrir's weakened pack never saw the attacks coming. A sentry disappeared here. A hunting party routed there. Psychological warfare at its most brutal. By midnight, the rival wolves were snapping at shadows, but Snowblood knew real victory wouldn't come until Fenrir himself fell. And that would require sacrifice.
Snowblood limped onto the frozen river alone. Let himself be seen. Fenrir took the bait with a howl of triumph. The chase was on,
But the cub wasn't running towards safety. He was leading Fenrir onto the thinnest ice. The alpha realized too late. With a crack that sounded like the world breaking, the ice gave way. Fenrir plunged into the black water. Snowblood turned back, not to watch the struggle, but to meet the remaining rival wolves' eyes. Their choice was simple: leave and live, or follow their alpha into the dark. One by one, they lowered their tails and ran. Spring came at last. The pack stood together at the gorge's edge, watching winter's last ice float away. No victory howls, no celebration, just quiet respect for the river that had taken and given in equal measure. Snowblood's legs still ached in the cold. Aurora's limp would never fully heal, but as the cub leaned against Storm's side, watching Tikani chase the season's first butterflies, he understood. They hadn't just survived the winter, they'd rewritten the rules of the wild. And somewhere out there, other outcasts were listening, learning, maybe even hoping.
Word traveled faster than spring runoff. Other wolves began appearing at the edges of their territory, not to challenge, but to watch. Lone wolves, misfits. Snowblood saw them sometimes, a one-eyed female here, a scarred young male there, all keeping their distance, but staying near, like they were waiting for something. Storm tolerated their presence in a way he never would have before. The rules had changed, the pack had changed, and the wilderness was taking notice. New grass pushed through the melting snow as Aurora led them to the high meadow, the same one where they'd first found Snowblood. The cub, no, not a cub anymore, rolled in the fresh growth, his white fur standing out against the vibrant green. But when he shook himself, the scars still showed. The mangled leg, the torn shoulder, the marks that said, "I survived." Storm sniffed at them approvingly. In the wild, scars weren't flaws, they were stories. And this pack story was only beginning.
Snowblood's voice would never sound quite right, too deep, too rough around the edges, but when he threw back his head and howled now, the pack answered without hesitation. Their combined voices carried across the valley, a symphony of mismatched notes that somehow fit together perfectly. From the distance, other voices hesitantly joined in. The one-eyed female, the scarred male, more. Storm didn't silence them. The message was clear. This territory had new rules now, and they were written in harmony, not blood. The first fish of spring glittered in the shallows. The wolves paced nervously. This wasn't their hunt, but Snowblood remembered. With careful swipes, he demonstrated how to pin the slippery prey. Tiani caught on first, then Aurora. Even Storm eventually managed to flip a fish onto the bank, looking absurdly pleased with himself. That night, as they gorged on fresh salmon, Snowblood realized he wasn't just part of the pack anymore. He was shaping it, changing it, and the wolves were better for it.
Something woke Snowblood at midnight, a feeling. Outside the den, the world held its breath. 2 moons hung in the sky, one silver in the heavens, one reflected perfectly in the still mountain lake. The pack gathered silently beside him, watching. No one moved. No one needed to. In that moment, everything was exactly as it should be. The scars, the losses, the impossible victories, all leading here, to this perfect stillness, to this family. The newcomer appeared at dawn, a massive wolf, darker than Storm, with one blue eye and one milky white. He didn't approach, didn't challenge, just watched. Snowblood felt Storm tense beside him, but the alpha didn't attack. After a long moment, The stranger dipped his head, just slightly, before disappearing into the mist. An understanding, a recognition. The pack exchanged glances. They all knew this wasn't the end, just another beginning.
They found it at the territory's edge, a fresh elk carcass, untouched. Not a random kill, a presentation. The dark stranger's work. Storm sniffed it carefully before allowing the pack to feed. The message was clear. Somewhere out there, others remembered, others understood. As Snowblood tore into the rich meat, he wondered how many more outcasts were watching, waiting, hoping for their own place in the wild. Their hunting formation changed that summer. Where before they ran in a tight group, now they left space, an open spot in their ranks. Not empty, just waiting. Sometimes the one-eyed female would fall into step there for a while before peeling off. Other times the scarred male. Never staying, not yet. But the invitation stood. The rules had changed. The wild had changed. And this pack would never be the same.
Snowblood saw it first, the way the light hit the mountains that evening, turning everything gold and purple and a color that wasn't quite either. The pack gathered on their favorite overlook, watching in silence as day bled into night. No need for words, no need for gestures, just presence, just family. The cub who shouldn't have survived, the wolves who shouldn't have cared. Together, always. The first winter storm came howling down from the peaks, covering their old scars in fresh white. But this time the pack wasn't alone. As Snowblood lifted his muzzle to taste the wind, answering howls came from all directions, some wolf, some not quite. The one-eyed female, the scarred male, the dark stranger, others, many others. Storm threw back his head and sang, his voice stronger than it had been in years. Aurora joined in, then Tikani, finally Snowblood, his bare voice rough but right. The sound carried across the frozen land, a promise written in ice and blood, and something even older. Hope. The ghost pack was real, and the wilderness would never forget them.